Here we are again. The three of us. Reverse redacting. How are you guys doing this morning?
Doing well. That was it. That was a very soothing little intro there. It's like you got your podcast voice on.
I'm trying to, brother.
It's a very Joe Rogan. It's very on point. It was a very Joe Rogan intro. You just needed the and three, two.
That's what I should have done.
Yeah.
I missed it. But let's start, as we often do now on the Reverse Redaction podcast. Let's start with the simultaneous sigh, as I think it's important to gulp in that delicious carbon oxygen. Who knows what's in your air?
What are you breathing? Carbon oxidant. Carbon oxidant, I believe it was. Yeah.
We're known for our scientific prestige.
Yeah.
So let's blow all our air out as we think about the morning, and then together let's take the simultaneous sigh. I feel a lot better already. Feel those dopamines. So today we are talking about Joe Rogan and his podcast in particular, but there's all kinds of things that come along with talking about Joe Rogan, right? It's just, he is such a man of so many different talents. The podcast, though, is where I really started to take, pay attention. And let's see, I think he started his podcast. Did he start 2009? Is that right? Where he started talking about he started podcasting mostly just talking about MMA stuff.
I think that's probably right. It was before Twitch was even a thing, because he was streaming through Justin.tv. That was what became Twitch eventually. So I think he started doing it. All his friends were like, "Why are you doing this?"
Yeah. Well, I guess I knew him from Fear Factor. I used to love watching Fear Factor, and he was always an interesting guy to lead it, because he's always been a no BS type guy.
Right.
And I think in going back and looking at some of his podcasts, the moment that really encapsulates his success for me is when Jordan Peterson talks about his success and says, he said, it's your curiosity. He said, there's a certain curiosity about you, but yet he said, you're tough as a boot. I mean,
tough as a boot.
You're tough as a boot. I mean, like, really think about it. And he said that when Joe Rogan has a point to make, he's not bullied, right? But by the same token, he doesn't pretend to know everything. He doesn't pretend to know, like, be smarter than the other person. But he is dogmatic about, okay, well, let's figure this out.
Right. Like, explain it. Yeah, that did. Yeah. If something doesn't totally make sense, he wants clarification, which I think is good. And
he is one of the, so he's, I would say, a tacit, I guess he's one of the main players in the intellectual dark web, but I wouldn't say, he's the only one that comes into it as a free radical. Like, he doesn't have he doesn't come into it with any kind of as an ideologue.
Right. I think in a way he's originally a left coast leftist that fought. And so that has turned him into a centrist in our current day and age. I mean, he'll have people on, like, I discovered this week, I didn't realize this. He had Andreas Antonopoulos on, who's, people call him jokingly Bitcoin Jesus. He had Bitcoin Jesus on. Antonopoulos hates that term. So I'm going to start calling him Bitcoin Aristotle. I think that's a pretty good one. But Antonopoulos on before 2015, when he had him on in 2014, Bitcoin was only worth like $300 something.
Really?
And yeah, and that, I mean, I was like, man, I wish I'd have been listening to Joe from day one, because he was way ahead of the curve. I mean, nobody in media was giving it. They'd already written Bitcoin off. I just read a Wired article written in 2011 that said the rise and fall of Bitcoin. When Bitcoin came back down to $1 or $3, they wrote that in November of 2011. And it's like, Joe was, and really then the entire community, the entire journalist, mainstream, just like, oh, well, Bitcoin's dead. And here we are, it's back up, it's knocking on 9,000's door again, all these years later. But yeah, he just had like that curiosity. I really appreciate that curiosity. He has people, he's not intimidated by anyone. He'll have leftists, he'll have righties, he'll have just about anyone on, and he'll hold people's feet to the fire, but without that really preachy sort of, what is the word? Like patronizing terminology, like
without any he doesn't have any dogma.
Right. Like his only dogma is just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, keep it honest. And like I disagree with him on some of his more left coast ways of looking at things, but I like him even when he's saying it. And it's because he presents it in a way that's not patronizing or, just self-righteous. So
right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the stuff you were talking about was all, just main little points I was writing down to make sure we brought up about him. It's kind of interesting because he, there's moments where he's almost like, then they're not too often, but it's almost like these moments where he's like drunk uncle from Saturday Night Live, where it's like, I heard that such and such, but it's something that's like off topic, like he does his homework on the guests and he knows, generally everything about him, but it'll be something that's semi-related and he'll be like, yeah, I heard that, and it's just completely wrong in every way, shape or form, and I'm just like, why is there no one else in the studio that can Google this for you? I know that this is just wrong on every level.
And he does have Jamie there to whoever Jamie is to Google stuff.
Right. But whenever I see it, it's like they never get back around to pointing out like, oh no, I don't know what I was thinking about on that. But like 99% of the time, he's really informed. And so I know we'll get to some of this stuff later, but just as an example, like, one of my favorite podcasts with him is William von Hippel, who's this professor of psychology at University of Queensland. And he really like just nailed that guy. Like it's not one of my favorite podcasts because, the guy really just makes this huge compelling case for everything that he wrote in his book. Joe really kind of hits him on several points where he's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I've got to, I can't say that with that much confidence or whatever. But it was great. I mean, this is a very in-depth, subject on, just on evolutionary, biology and things like that. And he knew his stuff well enough to just call him like multiple times on different things where the guy had to backtrack. So, right. And like you said, I mean, that's the reason I do like him is because he's, he doesn't come in with any, seemingly any real, agenda of, this is the other side. We've got to get them. It's just basically, he's got guests, everything from Alex Jones and Steven Crowder and, whoever else to, just these psychologists and sociologists and everything else. So I love that variety.
Definitely. You got Tulsi Gabbard on a couple times. He's had Yang on. So yeah, I mean, you get a broad swath, and I feel like it's actually more helpful when you hear the questions he asks, like a Democratic politician, than you would hear on your typical NPR style show. It's almost like they're almost just like having, coffee together in the halls of power. Like the things they seem to talk about just don't really apply to. There's a certain, it's like he's not a blue collar dude, but he understands like like middle America sentiment. It's almost like, it's not even like he's trying. He seems like he would get along with, that's the thing they could say about one of the things that Clinton was good at, Bill, was meeting somebody in a bar and remembering their name. It's just like approachable. But Joe has a much more, like the fighter side of that, more of like the rough and tumble, I think. And that makes him more relatable to to dudes. I mean, the fact that so many people are listening to the podcasts that get real deep. I mean, 2.5 hours, 3-hour podcasts. And that's one of the things Jordan, was amazed by, is just this long form, this long form that nobody in the industry would say could work.
Yeah.
Well, and the difference between the CNN sort of, or what were you saying? The
NPR.
Yeah, the NPR interview and these interviews. I think it's becoming more and more popular to do these sort of real, raw interviews, and there's nothing more raw than just sitting there with I don't know if he's doing them live, but he doesn't go back and edit them. There's no script. There's no, like you guys what we brought up, there's no preconceived, like, we have to talk about this is off limits. It's just two dudes, or a dude and a woman, and sitting down, a dudette, I guess you'd say, I don't know, but sitting down and just discussing whatever comes up.
Yeah, I think that's the 2019 term is dudette that the left is pushing of what they want. So just use that and see how that goes.
Dudette.
Yeah, but no, you're right. Yeah. I think people just are just looking for stuff that's real, and so little of what we get is real. I mean, if we watch someone on a talk show, they're there, the guest or the host has to be, has to maintain a certain kind of decor for the most part, to get them to come on in the first place. And if you're looking at, cable news, the person is either there because the channel agrees with them, or the channel's, has somehow gotten them to come on and they're going to hit them. So, it's just everything about the way he presents it is just very, real and about as middle of the road as anything I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast, I guess it's going to be my favorite podcast. I'm going to call it my favorite podcast, the one with Jordan Peterson. Rogan is trying to get him to stop going on these interviews, these media interviews, saying that they're being used against him. They're being edited against him and making him out to be a liar and a douchebag, on the left. And Jordan comes back and says, that could be, it's an interesting. So Rogan says, I don't do those. He refuses to do any media interviews. He says there's plenty of stuff out there. I've got how many episodes, 2 hours each, 3 hours each. If anybody wants to know my beliefs or what they can watch that. There's plenty out there, and there is. But there is something to be said. Jordan or Mr. Peterson, whatever, we're not on first name basis, but he says that there is something to be said about going to, my interpretation of what he's saying is going to their turf, to take your message to their turf, and I think the thing is with Joe Rogan, though, he doesn't have a turf unless it's fighting. There is that,
right,
that realm that he rules. I would say, after seeing that video that you posted, Ford going through all his best, I had no idea how he revolutionized that, the after fight commentary or interview.
Well, and it was real revealing to me when I realized that those two voices, the Joe Rogan podcast, check it out. I was like, who is this Canadian? And you can tell they're Canadian. It's like, well, that was Rory McDonald apparently after one of the fights in this post-fight interview. And then the other one, I always thought it was Joe that says, Train by day, Joe Rogan by night, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day. I thought that was Joe saying that, like at a comedy show or something. And then when I saw Nick Diaz say it, like, it just all made sense. I was like, and that's what's great about Rogan. In a way, it's almost like thinking man's WWE in the modern day, because there's like a mythos, you're going in and you're finding these little memes that are hidden here and there. Like, oh, now I understand. I guess I'm part of the posse now. I don't know why I have Coach Z's accent all of a sudden, North Dakota, but I'm part of the posse now. But yeah, I loved that. And yeah, and his expertise with the UFC, like I used to think, I just thought he was like kind of like I don't know. My cynical side just always thought that he was just another TV personality hack. I didn't realize he was. I guess Taekwondo was his gig.
Oh
that
man,
he was
have you seen him kick?
Oh, I know. And so I saw that video. When I saw that video, like, you know, on YouTube, I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm sure. And then when you finally actually click on it, you're like, what? That would break me in half. Like there would be two parts of me after that hit me. That was insane. So I was like, okay, this guy is not full of crap. I was wrong.
Jared, have you seen the video where he like does this like
spinning back kick?
He does
spinning back kick is his thing. Yeah.
No, I've got to go check it out, but no, I haven't seen it.
I thought he was gonna cut the punching bag in half with his foot.
And what's crazy about it is normally most dudes, like after that, they'd be like, oh yeah, you see that? He's just talking about the technique. Mm-hmm. He's like, so you really want to do it like this? And then when he does it, you're like, it sounds like a gunshot. So
he's almost sort of when you really start sitting down and thinking through all of his stuff, like Taekwondo, stand-up comedian. Like I knew him from, wasn't he on News Radio?
News Radio, yep.
Yeah, and then stand-up comedian, now hosts this. It's almost like our real-life version of the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah, and I think that's really what's won him over is that he's competent in all these different areas. And some people I've heard say that his comedy is not their cup of tea. I really haven't watched much of his stand-up.
I haven't either.
I don't really like stand-up usually, so it's like hard for me to judge it. I think he's genuinely funny on the podcast. Like when he laughs, I am cracking up. And like there's this one scene in it's Fight Companion. I'm going to mention one specific one, but this was a different Fight Companion. It was just him and Brendan Schaub. And at the end, towards the end, they go off on this 10-minute thing talking about chocolate body, how bodybuilders get away with spray tanning themselves to the point where they look black. And he's like, how are they getting away from this? Like, we were talking about blackface all the time. This is black body. We need to coin a term for this. Why isn't anyone talking about this? This is chocolate body. And then Jamie just keeps posting these more and more absurd things like, how dare you, sir? How dare you? He's like, this guy right here, this guy's like in one of those old movies. It's like a white guy playing the part of an Aboriginal. We have found gold. Dude, it's this 9-minute bit that every time I watch it, I just crack up like so. Because I've wondered that. I've looked at some of these bodybuilding competitions like, that's a white dude. He's so tan.
Yeah. What's really weird is when you see one of these guys in your own gym, like him as just this white as me sort of guy. And this happened one time. Like I walked in and I mean, like he was a younger guy, like probably early 20s, mid 20s, and as white as me. And then the next day I saw him and he had been training to go into one of these competitions. And I'm not exaggerating. It literally was like he had put on, and he had it on his face and everything too. It was like blackface. It really was. I'm just like, whoa, wow.
So disconcerting. And so they talk about that bit when they're talking about it. It's a really good fight that they're watching, but they go off on this tangent for 9 minutes. And I laugh the entire time because Jamie puts up one of this woman who's got it on her face. He's like, because they allege that when you do the tanning, it makes the definition look more pronounced. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what they do it, I guess. So he's like, wait a minute, she's got chocolate face. How can she get away with chocolate face? Like, what are you trying to do? Show how ripped your jawline is? Like, oh, I chew gum all day. My jawline's ripped.
That's a good point. Like, if it's showing your definition, why are you putting on your face?
Yeah,
I think it would just be such a stark contrast, that it would look somehow even weirder.
You know what they should do? They should just put it on the lines of the muscle. That's what they should do. Anyway, by the way, that's all I could focus on, Ford. When Ford showed this video of him doing he was singing Tom Waits. Check him out on the Surfing Violinist podcast. Dude, all I could focus on was your bicep. You have a humongous bicep.
Well, I was blessed with this, we talk about privilege. It's my genetic privilege, my biological privilege. I like have biceps for doing nothing. I never worked out when I was younger. I just had these biceps out of nowhere. And I was like, where did this come from? It's like, we need to weaponize this and like sell it like silicone implants for dudes because I don't earn this thing. But since I started working at this job, I've gotten in better shape than I've ever been. So I've almost got like a UFC fighter body, like my upper body, but I am suffering from that Johnny Bravo problem where it's like my legs are these little pencils. Like they were complimenting me at work the other day, like, man, Ford's forearms, biceps, man, you're making us look bad. But then my pants, my actual work pants were all dirty. And so I had to wear these jeans, these old jeans, and they were kind of skinny jeans. And so David walks in, they're all making fun of us. Like, what is with your jeans, man? He's like, you look like toothpicks with a cherry on top or something. And then David comes in and is like, man, I can't remember what he said now, but he just did a mic drop. One of my buddies at work, he just did a mic drop. He comes in and said, yeah, have fun with your walking off on the stick. I blowing the punchline, but it brought the house down. He just literally walked in and walked out. And I was like, oh, well, there went my street cred. I had the muscle cred one day, and then I wore the tight jeans, and they saw me for what I really was.
I heard a guy one time, a friend of a friend, that had an altercation in a parking lot with a guy, the body type that you're talking about. And I'm going to mess it up a little bit because I don't remember what he described the top half as, but basically said something like, you look like a bear just rode in on a flamingo. Or something like that.
That is perfection. You said that.
Well, so Joe Rogan is huge on personal health, and Jared, you were talking about going to the gym. Do you go to the gym regularly?
I do, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I go through these periods of like I'll just go to it like regularly for years and years and years, and then something will happen and then I'll get knocked out of it. But so like throughout high school, I didn't at all because I'm naturally just like an ectomorph, which is the skinniest body type. And so when I graduated high school, which I had a rough senior year of high school and I had the flu for a week. I mean, sickest I've ever been in my life. So when I graduated high school, I was 135 pounds at nearly 6 feet tall. And I look like people will, joke about it and say, you look like a Holocaust survivor. And I really did. And so also not very politically correct, but they can say it to me. It's fine. But then I started going to the gym some after that. And then it's really just kind of bounced back and forth. I really got there a good bit for several years and then took a job that just dominated my life. And then within the last year or so, I did get back into it. And so then now I'm actually trying to lose a little bit of weight because I went from like within 6 months, I went from like 170 to 210. But I mean, a good bit of it was muscle. So I was like, I don't want to be I don't really want to be the social media guy that's like, hey, here's my shirtless shots of what I looked like before. But like, it's a really dramatic difference. So,
right.
Yep.
Well, that gets into my favorite, like when we talked about our favorite podcasts. I talked about the one with
JBP.
No, well, that is my favorite one, but the one that I refer to all the time is the one with David Sinclair. He's that PhD on reversing age, reversing getting old, like stopping age. What is it called? Aging, stopping the aging process. But so I'm curious, Ford, what was the first Joe Rogan podcast that you tuned into?
I don't really remember, but what finally won me over to Joe Rogan was when Alex Jones came on the second time. I've never been an Alex Jones fan.
That was just recently.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've listened to here and there, like, I think I listened to maybe some bits of the JBP one. I think I maybe listened to some bits of Bill Burr. And maybe there was one I listened to entirely, but generally I have a short attention span. And so I never have really listened to podcasts with any sort of religious, thing until I started working this job where I'm doing mundane work. And so I can just, tune out for a period of time. The Alex Jones episode was the first one that I've ever listened to the entire thing. It's over 4 hours long. And I laughed so hard during that podcast because, Alex Jones is
crazy.
He's that crazy uncle. And but what I appreciate, what won me over to Joe was how he handled Alex on that podcast. That how most people would just distance themselves. And the setup for that podcast was Alex had challenged Joe to a UFC fight or an MMA fight because they had this breakdown. In that previous episode that Alex and Joe met up, you could tell Joe was just like, what are you talking about? Like Alex was just unhinged, just just assault rifle with nonstop, blather and conspiracy theory. I mean, he would leave one conspiracy theory to another conspiracy theory, and Joe's just like, what is happening? And so in that intervening time, they had some, I don't know, fisticuffs online or whatever. And so when Alex issued this challenge, Joe called him up and was like, hey man, and they had a 45-minute talk on the phone. He's like, just come on the podcast. Let's just talk this out. And that podcast is just, I heard in there like toxic masculinity finding a constructive release valve, because halfway through, Eddie Bravo comes in and trolls Alex, making fun of him, like saying one of his conspiracy theories is totally fake. And even though they just listened to the what he's claiming, they just listened to it. And everyone was like, I mean, Jamie and Joe were like, you're making that up. He's like, no, I'm not. And so Jamie found it online and played it. So Eddie comes in, he's like, you're making that up. And Alex blows a gasket, goes full Alex Jones, and he's just like, I mean, he's almost about to have a heart attack. He's like, and finally it takes like a minute of Joe being like, he's joking. He's playing you. Alex, Earth Alex. He's playing you, man. He's joking. And I mean, they're about to have a fight in the thing. And of course, Alex would have gotten his butt kicked because Eddie's like black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But anyways, like the way that Joe de-escalates those whole scenarios and humanizes a person that nobody on the internet wants to touch, I just thought was really ballsy for one thing, because I mean, it opens him up to all this, like everyone could call him an alt-right neo-Nazi because he has an alt-right neo-Nazi on or whatever. But he's like, no, I know this guy's not a neo-Nazi. He's weird. I mean, he's a conspiracy theorist, but by the end of it, there were actually constructive things they talked about that were very interesting and got me thinking about a lot of about DMT stuff. I mean, all that stuff, how Joe is about DMT, but some of those things, like, I almost think there really is like some witch doctor shaman prophet role that society and civilization have left behind. And there are certain people that are kind of crazy, but and schizo people and stuff that we're looking past. Like they actually have something. They don't have the right conclusion from what they've seen or thought they've seen, but there's something there. It's the signal and the noise. And what Joe showed to me is through his interviewing prowess, there is a way to extract signal from noise, even if the person is ranting and all. And so in a lot of ways, like you have been that for me, Judah, in these past 3 years, like through our podcast, like you've been able to find some of the signal in a lot of my noise. Because that's what I have in common with Alex Jones. I have just this unhinged, ranty rage stuff, and you'll say stuff, and then later on you go back and look at it, you're like, oh man, I didn't really mean that. I didn't know how else to say it though at the time, So I that's when I fell in love with Joe as an interview, and I realized that everything everyone said about him is true. And then just the fact that they're sitting there drinking whiskey together, it's just like, it feels so it's like, this is dudes hanging out and having constructive talk, not sitting there and being a-holes. I don't know. It was really good.
If you
We need to drink more whiskey. What were you gonna say, Jared?
No, I was just gonna say, if you want to see the polar opposite of that, go watch. You know who Logan Paul is?
Yes.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Logan Paul had Alex
Jones on. I listened to 10 minutes of it and I gave up.
It's like kittens trying to stop a steamroller.
Right. that's exactly it. That's exactly.
It's just, I mean, he's just like up walking around the set, I'm just like I watched it longer because I was just like mesmerized by it. But anyway, I
didn't last 15 minutes in that. But part of it is I cannot stand the Pauls. So
yeah, well, right, same. Yeah. I just watched it for that reason. But
right.
Well, but there's something to be said. So the kittens in the steamroller.
That's true.
Joe Rogan. The reason he was able to sort of hold there was such a physical thing. So
yeah,
I hate to keep talking about Jordan B. Peterson, but Jordan talks about how like men have this certain thing where they always think, well, can I beat this guy in a fight? Will I have to fight this guy if I disagree with him enough? And there's something about Joe Rogan's
stature,
stature and his presence that he could kick your butt, so you're not gonna steamroll him, and it comes across more than just physically. It comes across in his stubborn determination to get to truth and to get to clarity,
and that he's not out to get you, and it's like Gandalf and Bilbo scene. That's what that podcast was for me. It's like Joe Rogan is Gandalf, and and Alex is there with his precious. It's mine. And Joe's like, I'm not trying to take it from you. I'm trying to help you. Like that's Joe with Alex. I mean, he's doing it gently because I'm going to put my money on Joe in the Joe Rogan. I mean, Alex is a madman, and he actually has some, like athletic background, but I mean, his body ain't quite in shape to be able to handle Joe Rogan, I don't think. So I would put my money on Joe.
Although it wasn't until that podcast that I realized how big and muscular Alex is.
Yeah, Alex is more intimidating than I think people realize. And if you go back and look at early Alex Jones when he was like doing public access television, the dude has always been a ham. Like a lot of it, he's a heel turn. Like, I mean, he really is an entertainer, and he is using, conspiracy theory radio as kind of his genre. The problem is when you act like that long enough, like it's hard to separate the persona from the man, And so I think he is in a very difficult place where is he Alex Jones or is he the Alex Jones online? And I think they're mingled at this point.
And the big thing was Sandy Hook, and what he did with that. And at that point, once he really like got done with all that, I'm just like, I don't have any need to hear. I mean, he's funny, for me in bits, but just everything he did with that, just kind of, I was like, okay, I'm done with you. I mean, not that I was ever in on him, period, but I mean, just generally in listening to him, period, it's just hard for me to ever get past that. That's just what I think of when I see him. So
that brings to mind this. So recently there was this big New Yorker, was it New York Times article, started as an online article that talked about the turning this guy alt-right through YouTube. I'm sure you guys saw that. And I saw it mostly through Philip DeFranco's discussion of it, because Philip DeFranco was featured on it, because it's this big article about turning people alt-right through YouTube, and it shows Philip DeFranco. And then they
showed Philip DeFranco in that?
Yes.
Golly,
yes.
That just I can't take any of these people seriously anymore, man.
But so the whole controversy is that who was featured in the pictures, because it was a dynamic interview, article online where each page you go to, the preceding page, different pictures would disappear, kind of showing a flow or something like that. There was some aspect to it.
That is just the cringiest BS, man. But that's so stupid.
They talked about the intellectual dark web. So my question is for Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan was talked about in this article, and he was sort of labeled alt-right.
Come
not
on, man.
overtly, but the insinuations were there through the pictures, through his, bringing him up. And I heard someone say, oh, it was, I always come back to certain guys, but Scott Adams talked about the reason he never ever wanted to be associated with the intellectual dark web was because of, he didn't want to ever get this kind of association, which I think is a little bit, cowardice, but it begs the question of like, should or how does this affect, so that he has these crazy people on?
Okay,
Joe
yeah.
Rogan.
So when people start doing that, like guilt by association garbage and slippery slope, they've ceased becoming intellectuals or ceased becoming philosophers, and they have become religious adherents. Like they're talking about excommunicating people because of associations, and this is insane. This is dark age style thinking. This is a papacy in action. This is not a free enterprise of thought. This is not a college. This is not a university. And here's the thing. We don't even need to worry about it because it's moot.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's over. Like if they keep doing this stuff, they are just going to become more and more and more insular because what's going to happen is they're going to continue to schism because, oh, well, you think that this one person's okay. And I think Yang is too alt-right. He's a Democrat and he's alt-right. Yeah. Well, yeah, he's alt-right. Okay. Okay. Well, then I don't know what to say. Oh, well, I think Elizabeth Warren is too right. Oh, okay. Hillary Clinton is too right. Okay, fine. They're just going to continue to tribalize into smaller and smaller fragments. So I was listening to, you want to talk about real controversial, some Kantbot 20K. He's one of the, you call him like neo-reactionary accelerationist. They just started a podcast and I started listening to that. And so he had Logo Daedalus on, who's more on the literary end of that. And these guys, they're younger than us. And they're probably the generation between, like, I would imagine they're 25. They sound so young to me. I don't know. But in the course of, since Trump got elected, like these guys, they have exploded. And most of them are not right in a lot of areas. But they just keep getting doxxed and penalized. One of them had an FBI come over to his house because, he said a joke online, and Logo was saying, as far as like the tribalized, like how he's not allowed to be talked to by his former friends that, he used to be a communist too. And card carrying member of all that. And then he actually read the books. He actually read all of Marx and was like, okay, I don't agree with any of this. But if he starts talking about this, people within the Democratic Socialists of America are like, oh, you read stuff? What a weirdo. And so you can't have conversations with them. And so they can't have conversation with you because you're persona non grata. And he said, look, I'm not worried about it anymore. At this point, they are just it's going to hurt them. It doesn't hurt us. Like, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you call Philip freaking DeFranco alt-right, like that just shows how clueless you are. I mean, the mainstream media is no longer mainstream. Joe Rogan is mainstream. Like it's all shifted. He is more listened to than any single communicator in the history of the world. It's insane. A billion. It's like what? I mean, what? When JVP broke down the math, Joe was like being, humble about it. And I don't think it was false humility. I think he was just like, I don't like to think about it,
Mm-hmm.
But because when you think about it, it's absurd. It's like 1/7 of the world's population in terms of numbers. Like it's crazy. He's mainstream now. So they can sit there and, cast aspersions on him from the Washington Post to the New York Times. They're lucky to get the same view count, in a month, what he gets on one episode. I'm looking at Neil deGrasse Tyson's episode. He's got 10 million views on that one. 2 hours and 14 minutes of Joe Rogan talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Wow.
10 million freaking views, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah. And that's the scary thing is the circle of what is considered alt-right just keeps expanding out. I mean, and so one of my favorite podcasts, the one that I told you about was, Jonathan Haidt, the Coddling of the American Mind, the social psychologist and professor of ethical leadership at NYU. And so he gets into, a lot of that type of stuff, talking about what's happened with universities and everything that kind of came together around 2014. to really start, you know, kind of changing how things run on universities. But, you know, he was talking about how, you know, not just with the students, but with professors, you know, those places used to be a place where people were all there to try to, you know, disprove each other's ideas, you know, the whole concept of peer review, and how then eventually the game changed, and the game changed very quickly to, you know, we're not playing tennis anymore, lobbing, you know, these ideas or questions back and forth. Like all of a sudden some people are now playing football, you know, so you're getting tackled, you're getting tackled on the tennis court, because you know, they're fighting something. And so yeah, that's kind of the scary thing, is just there, he was talking about, you know, at one point how there's just more and more pressure to, like in the 90s, if you knew someone's view on blank, then you could, you know, predict a certain amount of, but it was a relatively low amount of their, you know, other views. And now there's just more and more pressure to agree with your tribe on everything, and to, you know, to not question anything. So yeah, back during the whole thing, you know, just like you were talking about with him, like people labeling him alt-right just for talking to these people. Like there was most of the time I get called a liberal online, but back during the whole thing, back in, I guess it was January or February, when the stuff happened with at the I guess was it the Lincoln Memorial with the Covington Catholic kids and the Native American elder, and there were the Black Hebrew Israelites and all that. So I got into these Twitter, we'll call them discussions, with people about that, because after all that came out, I'm like, look, anyone who knows me knows that I am not part of the MAGA crowd, but this is just what happened. You know, these boys didn't, you know, attack this guy, assault this guy. He inserted himself into the situation. You've got this other group that's yelling, you know, all these homophobic slurs and this, that, and the other. So and people were just, there was this cartoonist in Atlanta who I'd kind of gotten to know a little bit online. And he's very much subscribes to that. Yeah, we've got to, you know, defend the tribe. I've got to agree with the tribe on everything. That just went off on me, just blocked me, everything else. But like him and people like that were saying, I would never defend someone like that. I'm like, look, it's not about, it's just defending facts.
Was he talking about defending the Covington kid?
Defending the Covington kid, yes, for saying
the face crime kid.
Yeah, for saying that this didn't happen. And I'm like, well, like if you saw a car wreck, if you saw one guy run a red light, if you saw a liberal run a red light and hit another guy, that's a MAGA crowd guy, you know, and you were questioned at the scene, what would you say? Would you admit that? Or because I mean, that's essentially all it is here, is just saying these are the facts of what happened. And so that conversation really was an eye opener for me of how far things had gone, just in terms of, no, even if the facts don't agree with us, because of what they believe, you don't defend them, you know? So right. It's really getting to a scary, scary place.
Well, and I think I think that was the thing. You know, we kind of had a rift form during the whole election, and I had a rift form with close friends, and that some of them are still not mended. But I think it was partially because I was overreacting to a lot of this stuff. Like I felt like I couldn't speak, and the thing is, the truth is, I can speak. I mean, I might get doxxed. I might get, you know, blacklisted. I might what? And what I'm realizing now is that it like there's no reason for me to overreact and get angry about this stuff. I can say what I think, and if there are consequences for that, I'm just, my default from now on is like, okay, you think I'm a Nazi? Come punch me. Yeah, I mean, just try to punch me. We'll go a whole round. We'll go to a whole round. You get 3 minutes for free in the ring. And after that 3 minutes, you're still mad. We can go another 3 rounds. I won't hit. I'll just like expose weaknesses. Oh, yep, I would have had you there. Come on now. If you're gonna beat Nazis, you gotta work, you gotta, you know, up your game a little bit here. Because I think I mean, that's really what I have gotten to the point of realizing, is that the left, like someone, I mean, people I love, you know, I love these people, but they laughed about the milkshake being thrown on Nigel Farage the other day. It was like a victory for them. Like, haha, milkshake got thrown on Nigel Farage. And I hate to admit it, guys, but 2 days later, Brexit got re-voted for.
Right.
So that milkshake doesn't mean anything. It's just these token stances. It's like, okay, like Arnold Schwarzenegger got double leg kicked by some kid in South Africa and looked like a pencil. Like from one angle, you're like, oh shoot, I hope Arnold's okay. From the other angle, you're like, I hope the kid's okay. Like Arnold doesn't even move. And it's like, it's literally getting to that point. It's like, I mean, Arnold is now an alt-right, like neo-Nazi or something for like doing like drawing attention to like young Africans who are working hard. Like, I'm like, what? He's colonial now?
Well,
but that's fine. Like, let them kick him. They're just going to break their foot.
But here's the thing: is you said earlier, like it's not going to hurt us; it's going to hurt them.
Yeah, like, we have some empathy, I think, at this point. It's absurd. They're going to lose.
But here's the thing: is it does hurt everyone in the sense that it starts to deconstruct the whole definition of racism. Like when you start calling everybody a racism, then true racists are the ones who get, it's like we
get
talked
the past.
About, we
that's
start
true.
subsidizing malice. And it bothers me, not because people might think I'm an alt-right or what have you, but when real alt-right people come along, they
real white supremacists.
Yeah,
like if you call everyone a white supremacist, then that makes the real white supremacists get away. Like, okay, so one of the things they were bringing up, and this is real controversial, but in that podcast they were talking about Richard Spencer and how, I mean, he is an actual white nationalist, right? But at the same time, he's a more chastened white nationalist than Hitler. Like, he's not advocating like lynchings. He's not he's a white nationalist, but he's not a white nationalist that wants to kill people. Right now you have Hindu nationalists in India, and this is controversial for me to say out loud, but there's millions strong, not like 500 people in Northeast Alabama and Northeast Georgia. It's like millions strong with political clout, with funding, and they are beating people up, physical violence, not talking about like ideology, not talking about ideals, not talking about just racial, autonomy, which is what Richard Spencer's doing. Like, so you're saying that someone can't even talk about it because it's a slippery slope to the physical violence thing. We are at such a point in history now. If someone looks at someone the wrong way, we're like, don't even think about it, dude. Don't even think about it. Like, I would come out of the woodwork if Richard Spencer actually went and punched a black dude, at one of his rallies. I'd be like, no, ain't gonna happen. You can come punch me. Like, there's enough now. And it's so stupid when like 80% of Joe's guests on his show are black or from another ethnicity. He has a Muslim guy on twice now, Faraz Sahabi, one of the best jiu-jitsu and UFC mixed martial artist teachers in the world. And listen to that podcast. Like, if you're a white nationalist and listen to that podcast, probably by the end of it, you're like, man, that guy's really good. Like, man, I should learn from that guy. So I can't see how a white nationalist or anybody, like the slippery slope argument, I just don't think it's as real as it was before, because you're going to see these things, these warning signs, way before they actually happen. And the thing is, one of the biggest threats right now to the black community in Southern California is Mexican street gangs. But they won't talk about that out loud because that sounds racially charged. Like, oh, well, that's you. Now they don't know. I mean, the left cannot compute. We can't talk about this because, what is the privilege game? Who's more privileged, the Mexican or the black person? It's like, black people are being killed. Like, innocent kids are being killed, but because it's not a white guy doing it, they can't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to your point there, another thing from that Hype, podcast was that the definition of this is maybe the single most insane thing to me. The definition of racism or prejudice is now being changed. And I encountered this again, like on Twitter, like months ago, and I thought it was one crazy person. And it wasn't until the Hype podcast that I realized, like, oh no, there's actually an academic, intellectual movement to change it to racism isn't racism unless it's prejudice plus power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so like a Hispanic or black person or whatever can't really be racist against that other person because neither one of them really have the power.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that those accelerationist guys brought up, is that the left made something happen, and they actually have a conspiracy theory about it that's kind of, I think, intriguing, that all of this stuff really blew up just before Trump, and it seems almost convenient that it happened the way that it did, because Marx's, the Marxist typical claim was focused on class, not on race. It was a classist claim, and the whole notions of class have gone out the window in these discussions. It's always monochrome. Or four tones, where it's tonal, but there's never any nuance when it comes to class. And so they're defeating their whole purpose, because you're really going to tell me that, some miner's kid in West Virginia who's white, but, is a hillbilly that can barely read, is more privileged than Barack Obama's children. Like, you're really going to go there? But that's really the one. There's only one rubric by which we can judge, and it's tonal. It's not even analog. We don't even have decimal places here. It's like, white, black, brown. Right. We're not going to talk about Asians. We're going to leave them out of the equation here. We're going to pretend Asians don't exist. We've got this. This is it. This is the milieu that we have to deal with. It's three tones.
Speechless. No, it just has me thinking. I mean, here we are, three white guys talking about this.
Oh, what do you? This is a good joke that my liberal friend brought up, though. What do you call three white dudes?
What?
Or what do you call a group of white dudes?
What?
A podcast. I was like, all right, that's good. I laughed at that one.
That is pretty good.
See, if the left can meme a little better, like, I mean, if you get us, you get us. That's good. I'll take that that joke, that jab at the cis white male. Yeah, all right, that's fine.
Well, I think it's healthy for us to be talking to be talking to each other about this,
to
talking it out. I think if we weren't talking it out, I mean, part of it is coincidental that we're all three white, but part of it's not. I mean, we went to an all-white school, but not all white, but it was like mostly, what do they call, predominantly white school. We
had some international students.
Yeah,
but yeah, you're right.
African Americans, but I don't know. It's frustrating to me that I start feeling guilty when we start talking about these things. Like, we can't talk it, like there's a taboo-ness about them. Like, who's going to hear this? Like, who? It's frustrating because we can't get to truth, and that's the part. Is if we keep silencing dissenters. Then the Streisand effect will, you close it down one place, it's going to explode somewhere else.
Right. In some ways, you give them really good marketing. One of the things I really did like in that Jonathan Haidt podcast that you mentioned, Jared, at the end, he did mention, I think it was Mill, his book, and it was about freedom of speech. And Mill, we tend to think of from the utilitarian thing, he was definitely involved with factories and all that stuff, but I didn't even know he'd written that. And he loved this book so much that Haidt's offering it for free as a PDF download. And he's really trying to, because Haidt, I mean, if we're talking about in terms of left-right divides, Haidt would be more left of Joe. I would, from what I really heard in that interview. But even still, just the fact that he is, there was a lot of really good stuff in that interview, and the fact that he's willing to come out too as a professor, from Martha's Vineyard and have that much be associated with Joe. I think that's a sign of good things. I think there are a lot of people that we assume it's just the noisiest wheels are the ones we're hearing right now.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of really interesting fireworksy stuff happening out there in all these communities. I think we'll get there. We just have to I think if we're more on the right, we do need to spend more time around like LGBT community, really, like truly, like hang out and realize, oh, wow, we like this show. It's the same. I mean, why do you like it? I wouldn't expect you to like it. And like my bisexual friend, like the other day, she had a criticism of Guardians 2. And she said that she didn't like, as a comic fan, she didn't like how they portrayed Mantis, and and her reason for it. Like, I actually understood. I was like, okay, no, I get that. That makes sense. I mean, and really, I mean, that's some of the frustrations that some of the guys have about certain things that have been done to comic characters as well. Okay, that makes sense. And it's like, we need that interaction so you can actually not just hear the token stance. You know, you can hear oh no, that actually has legs. I can get behind that one. But the difficulty with that is you're going to hear the other side's talking points, and they are going to trigger you. And like, you're just gonna have to take a breath, because I mean, she said some things. It's like, well, I mean, you're talking about me now. You just called me a piece of shit. And she didn't even mean to say it necessarily, but she, so
yeah. Well, that kind of stuff doesn't usually. Well, I mean, we've established that our personality types are a little bit different,
definitely,
despite despite all of our commonalities or whatever. But you're quicker to go to the emotional level than I am. I'm probably too far to the other side, but that stuff doesn't trigger me. What triggers me is the, just going back to the whole, like, labeling people as alt-right so that their voice doesn't count in the first place. There's a lot of small ways in which people do that too. And again, on the internet the other day, I got accused of mansplaining. And then
I've been there.
Yeah. And then when I replied again to try to explain, I was told that I was mansplaining my mansplaining. And so as much as calm as I am on stuff, like on that type of stuff, if I see someone's just playing a game, then I start trying to break the game, and so I just like quadrupled down on it, and so I was like, well, I guess now would be a bad time to acknowledge that I think you're using that term wrong. And it's really just like a toddler improperly throwing around a new word they've learned.
Go.
So yeah, but there's so much
add
of it.
ageism to your list.
Yeah, yeah, we'll just pile on, whatever. And but there's a lot of stuff like that. So a lot of that, insults or stuff like that, it's like, I can do that all day. It's the Captain America thing, it's like, if you want to insult me, if you want to engage with me, I can do this all day, but it's really just when people start trying to, because that's the game with a lot of it, is my argument can't beat yours. So if I can put a label on you to where your thoughts don't count in the first place because you're, supposedly alt-right, even if you're not, or that, you're doing this, horrible, archaic tactic of mansplaining. So they try to just, defeat your argument from the beginning. And so again, then I start trying to break the game, so to speak.
Right.
So
It's like Ford will just at some point collapse out of, the exhaustion of his anger. I will collapse out of like this, like, teary, I can't do this anymore. But Jared just keeps going.
I do
like
that. It's one of the it's one of the best things, and it's one of the worst things about me too. Is because, and people will tell me, like, God, I feel sorry for people who get in these, locked in these debates, because I know you just won't quit until you have just. I mean, if it's a stranger, I've hopefully observed some better
feelings,
some better manners. Sure, we'll go with that. Yeah, but like, if it's someone I'm engaged in a debate with, and I care about the relationship or whatever, it's one thing. But if I don't, and especially if they've just come out of the gate attacking me, then it's like, I can just go on, forever, and we'll just keep escalating this. So it's a good, like, I've got unlimited endurance. Like, if I was an RPG character, it would just, like, the endurance would just be like maxed out to infinity. But at the same time, it's bad. It can be bad too, because I just don't quit sometimes when I should. So.
Well, and I think that's one of the difficulties with the online communication, because I remember one time you said a joke, and it was just totally a joke. Yeah. But I was in a really bad place. Like,
yeah, I think I remember this. Yeah.
I don't even, did we talk about this one? I don't know, but
I don't know, maybe this is a different one.
It's probably, during that period, we were both we were both frustrated by many things. And,
right.
And then of course the clown world of the 2016 election and everything that followed. but you said something. I'm pretty sure the one was you likened Trump to
what did I say?
you likened Trump to a Morton Joe, and I was
yes.
I was just one of his what are they called?
War Boys.
War Boys, yes.
Yeah.
And so,
That part I don't think I threw in. I think I just did the Morton Joe because it's a picture of him driving, and I said something to unless I did a second one. But it's just a picture of a Morton Joe. It's like that Zoom push or whatever of where he drives off of that cliff of rocks, and it zooms up real quick to him. And I said something like, Trump heading to Inauguration Day in 2017 or something like that. I don't think I said anything about the War Boys, but
in a comment you did. And so I think you were probably referencing that.
Oh, probably.
And so yeah, at the time, I can't remember what I was doing, but I totally forted out about it. And it was, I lost my shit, and I recorded a video, which I never sent to you or anybody. It's still there somewhere, so we could watch it sometime. Let's. No, we'll do it another time. I'm in a much better place now. But just to show one of the things, I'll mention my next favorite Joe Rogan is his fight companion on February 17th, 2019, and that was the first fight companion he ever did. And so what they do is they just watch fights and they shoot the shit, and so they're eating cheese, and the whole time Jamie's like, get away from the mic, we're getting lectured by the YouTube audience, please. And Joe's like, you got to get away from the mic. What? And it's just dudes. It's toxic masculinity locker room talk, but somehow mediated by the experience of other people watching. So it makes it more presentable. It's not so terrible. And it's also, they're calling each other on their bullshit. So at one point, like, Brian Callen is like, oh, I'm as ripped as that guy. They're like, no, you're not. And he takes off his shirt, and he's like, he goes up next to the screen. He's like, come on, man, come on. And there's something just like great about the personal interaction. So it's like us being able to have this conversation and read the looks on each other's faces, as opposed to typing it out, where you're just typing it like as right. You would say the same thing to me when we were at college, and I would be like, I'd get a bashful look on my face, like, yeah, right. But like, because I was in a bad mood that day, like, it just it caught me the wrong way, and there was enough truth in it for me not to think of it as just a fun joke. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that is one of the great things that Joe and this whole podcast thing is doing is, okay, we're able to do this in such a way that, like, you have a skill, like, you shouldn't repress that skill, like, and when you did it with your monologue about me and Game of Thrones, like, it made me laugh because I got the nuance of your performance too. Right. So it's like we need these more, we need to have the nonverbals in there too. Yeah. I think that's one of the problems with Twitter and Facebook and everything. You probably be friends with some of these people that you hate online, and, but all that's kind of lost. And, it's easier to read the room when you're actually having a conversation to know that, oh, this is not the time to deliver this.
Right. Right.
But at the same time, like, there's another episode, I'm sorry, this is my third episode, but when they had he was on Brendan Schaub's podcast after Brendan lost a fight, and it's an hour of Joe Rogan telling Brendan to quit fighting. And what? Yeah, and it's just, you can tell, like, Brendan is in that place that I was in when I got that, like, tweet from you. But because Joe is so careful and saying it, like, as a person that's a fan, like, Brendan, I think, slowly but surely gets the message. It's like, they're doing, like, him and Brian Callen are just trying to make sure he doesn't end up with brain damage 20 years from now. Right. They don't want to see him with, Parkinson's or something. So it was just one of the most heartfelt rebukes I've ever seen, and him doing it live in front of people. It was beautiful. It was really a thing of beauty. And then after that, for Brendan Schaub to be a permanent fixture of the fight companions, it's like, once again, like, seeing the other side of the mythos. You're like, oh, okay, this is how they got here, and they have story arcs in real life, and all friendships do have that. And the difficulty with social media is that we don't have that long form to actually talk it out. you know, and so
Mhm.
you can jump to conclusions about what somebody's saying or thinking, and so this interaction is just so much better.
I remember our first year of at Toccoa, I was still trying to maintain a relationship with my girlfriend, high school girlfriend, and we tried to maintain it through. Remember ICQ?
Yes.
I do remember that.
And how you could see somebody writing, and so you couldn't make mistakes because you could see them writing. Back up and keep writing. And some of the worst fights I've ever had in a relationship came, through this, without being able to see someone's face, get their, tone of voice, and still seeing the writing. It was a mess. I always remember that as just a great example of how text cannot convey a good conversation.
Right. It's really, it's better at communicating facts.
Yeah.
Meet me here.
Yeah. Messages. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny because we've moved almost exclusively to that. It's like if I have to call somebody, I mean, not just anybody. I mean, there are people that, I would, if we had more opportunity, I'd love to talk to on the phone or something, or this kind of interaction. Mm-hmm. But in most instances, I'm like, oh my God, please don't pick up. Please just let me leave a voicemail.
It's so true, man.
You are just like praying that they don't pick up the phone and you can just leave a voicemail, or that you can text or something. And it really is, it really is the worst, it's the easiest and the worst form of communication, but we've gotten to a point where that's what, in most situations, I think that's what with most people, at least, that's what we want.
It's really like we need a quiver of all the technologies that we've become dependent on, but it's a quiver, and each one is a specialized arrow for a different thing, and you just use it as you need. Instead of as a crutch, you use it as a specialized arrow. It's like we need Hawkeye's quiver. That's what we need.
Yeah. Right. That's a good one.
Although I do think that people it could be forcing people to do more of this. I don't think video messaging will ever work very well because I never want to, hey, it's my hair, I don't want you to see me. And it's the opposite of text, which is what we love. But it is forcing us to meet, I think of texting. I have less discussion with people that are not accessible unless I'm doing something like this. I have less discussion with people that are somewhere else, location wise, and there's more of like, hey, let's meet up. It's just too hard to let's just talk about it. Meet me here, or, this kind of thing. And I think it may get to the point. I do believe there are cycles where when things start getting too bad, we just naturally find a way to connect.
Yeah, it's funny because I used to hate Skype when we were living in India. I didn't like it at all. It was always so awkward. But it's weird, like when we do it in a podcast format, because you really can't talk over each other. I like this. I like the three of us being able to talk way better than having a phone call. And I think it's because I can actually read. It's the video actually serves a purpose now. Before it was just like, hey, how are you doing? No, you first. Like, oh gosh, I hated Skype, dude. I hated it when I was in India. I don't want to do it. I got something to do. I'm out.
Yeah, you can even kind of see if you're kind of a little paying attention to the little windows. Like, is someone like starting to try to make a comment or something and go back to them? Yeah, I think it's much better in that sense.
Okay, well, I've got to go. I hate to wrap it up so quickly and abruptly.
Did you have one more podcast you want to mention?
Did I have one more what?
Podcast?
Joe Rogan podcast.
No, it was the two that I mentioned. I kind of briefly touched on Hipple, and there's just so much from each one of those. You really just have to kind of touch on it briefly. So I was writing all those out, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're just gonna have to briefly touch on these, because even one of these in itself could be its own podcast. And if we multiply that by, or that we did, if you multiply that by two each for us 6, that would be a 13-hour podcast. So,
well, hold your thought, because what I want to reverse redact next time is podcasting. I want to get deeper into the long form and what its implications are for our society, and kind of like, what do we love about it? What works for us individually and as a society?
Good. Yeah, that'd be perfect.
And we can bring up, Joe Rogan. There's a lot of things we can draw, of course. He seems to be the king of it right now, especially as we talk about YouTube and its interaction with podcasting. But I think going forward, what I don't know what you guys take, but what I take from Joe Rogan is the necessity, the utility of being curious, being stubborn, but curious in a way that you're not foisting your opinion on somebody else, but looking at facts, clarifying, and getting to truth through questions. And I think that's how storytelling. I've always talked about how storytelling to me is always better if it's got a series of queries that leads me to some kind of theme.
Right.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's fine.
So Vice News, like when they first came out on the scene, it was like a kind of a revolution because they were going the opposite direction of what everyone else on YouTube was going. Everyone's going short. It was like 2 minutes, 22 seconds. That was kind of the ideal watch time at that point. And Vice did the totally opposite direction. They went these 50-minute long documentaries, and it seemed like they were starting something new, heading in a different direction, utilizing the full format capability. But then they got very, whatever happened to them. Whatever. I don't even want to speculate what caused their downfall, but they got mainstreamified or something. But Joe took the same thing, but with no pretension, not trying to be some artsy documentary or some, highfalutin thing. It's just dudes talking without a length cap, and he just, through sheer dent of will, over 1,000 podcasts now, it's insane how dedicated he's been, his work ethic with it. And even when people weren't watching that much. And I don't know if I've mentioned this on the show, but the reason we have the Joe Rogan podcast is because of the Fleshlight. That was the first sponsor of the Joe Rogan podcast.
What?
That is the reason why the Joe Rogan podcast exists, because a male masturbatory tool funded that. Yeah, did you not know that, Judah?
I know.
That's because that's what started it all out. And so if you go back to his ones that aren't on iTunes, but like the really early ones that it's just you have to go and find them on the web. So I was going to go back and watch this. Oh man, this one was real interesting. Some neurobiologist or something like that. This guy was super smart. And so Joe, the guy's in the studio. It was prior to Jamie. The guy's in the studio. He's got another guy there. He's like, and the Joe Rogan podcast brought to you by the Fleshlight. This is really stupid. Here we are about to have this really intense intellectual conversation with a genius. And I'm talking about a rubber vagina. But that's why we're here, man. That's why we're here.
Just how far into the pitch did he have to go with this? Because most, he went,
man. It's like a minute at you. It's a real interesting cultural artifact to listen to.
But did he deliver? Because most of these radio ads, the person has to talk about using the product,
right?
So it's like there's a wrestling podcast, Chris Jericho, and he's like sponsored by some kitty litter. And he's like, I just love this kitty litter because it just, it keeps the house from stinking. And so I'm just imagining Joe having to go into details about what he loves about the Fleshlight.
Oh, dude, it's the most surreal thing. But we have, let's be honest. The reason we have so many innovations on the internet is because of porn and Fleshlight. So there it is. It's the reality of the situation. But no, I'm thankful for him persevering through those early years and getting to what we have now. Mm-hmm. He really kind of paved the way for, it wasn't like he invented podcasting. I was listening to podcasts back in 2005, like Film Spotting. Maybe it was a little bit later than that. But it was because of them that really developed an interest in film more. But Joe just took it to this. They still followed the format of traditional radio, and Joe just decided we're going to talk.
Yep.
I mean, no frills here. Let's just get into it. Let's just jump into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts, takeaways, Jared?
Just I like, this is the one real podcast that I would recommend to people, because it, like I said, it just covers such a variety of topics, and his approach to it and everything else. Most of the time, not necessarily specifically in podcasts, but most of the time I think I spend my time telling people, please stop watching Fox News. Please stop watching, I'm sorry, Judah, Ben Shapiro, or whatever. But with Joe, I'm like, yeah, go listen to Joe. This one's great.
Yeah, I mean, and if you like Ben Shapiro, then just listen to Joe's podcast with Ben Shapiro. That's all you need to hear.
There you go.
Hold on. Ben Shapiro.
That's a whole other podcast, and we've actually already done it. You just need to put it up.
It's up on YouTube if you want.
Oh, is it? Is it now? I didn't know. Okay.
It's been. We did it a long time ago, but
yeah, but I just didn't see where you'd put it up. Okay.
Oh, maybe it needs to be made public, but
that would help. Yeah,
we've done it twice actually.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that Ben Shapiro, he interviews people too. It's more production involved. It's less two dudes talking, smoking pot, but it's
you need the pot. You just need it, baby.
Anyways, guys, get to work. There's a lot to build.
Make your own myth.
Winter's canceled.
Wah, wah. I always want to do that when you say that.